On today's show, Ime Udoka's introductory press conference as the new head coach of your Houston Rockets, how they almost perfectly handled addressing the Boston issues that came along with Udoka, discussing different player goals and vision for this Rockets roster moving forward, plans for the assistant coaching staff, and Tilman Fertitta weighing in on forgiveness and his spending over the years as the Houston Rockets owner. We're going to unpack all of that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Today's question, I want to know how you feel in the aftermath of Ime Udoka's introductory press conference. Do you feel better? You feel worse? How do you think they handled the Boston situation, addressing the concerns there? What do you think about Ime's vision for the future of this Houston Rockets team? Let me know in the YouTube comments. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day. If you're an everydayer, thank you. Whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym, slacking off from work, thank you for making LOR part of your day every single day. Salute to the everydayers. So much to unpack from Ime Udoka's introductory press conference. I've got a lot of clips that I've chosen, I've grabbed, key takeaways, I think, from the presser. But what I want to say first before getting into some of these clips is I really do think that the Rockets handled addressing the baggage that comes along with Ime from Boston almost as perfectly as they could have. And I say almost as perfectly, and we're going to explain why here in just a second, but I do want to just go ahead and dive in, and this should be the main takeaway from this, is this was a majority of the questions were centered and focused and catered on just how Ime has handled himself in the aftermath of that situation. And so let's go ahead and just dive straight in and hear from the man himself what Ime Udoka had to say about the Boston issues.
You left Boston under a cloud and some controversy. What can you tell us about that situation, and why do you feel it was right for the Rockets to hire you anyway?
Well, I'd say in general, like Tilman alluded to, they've done their due diligence and homework on who I am as a person. I think we spent quality time together, getting to know each other, and we clicked pretty easily and pretty well. But overall, I released a statement months ago when everything happened, and apologized to a lot of people for the tough position I put them in, and I stand by that, and I feel much more remorse even now towards that. And so, I spent this last off season working on myself in a lot of different ways, improving in areas, chance to sit back, reflect, and grow, and I think that'll make me a better coach and overall a better leader. But the matter has been resolved, and I can't really speak much about it.
And then for Ime, are you able to elaborate on the work that you said that you did and kind of some of that reflection and maybe what you learned from it?
Yeah, I mean, just having that time off and really a full understanding of how many people you impact by a poor decision. That's where you start with the ownership and accountability. I preach that to the players, and so I have to take responsibility for my part in it. Took leadership and sensitivity training and some counseling with my son to help him improve the situation that I put him in, and so I spent the year. You can grow from adversity, and I think I've done that this year. If you spend it in the right direction or take the right steps. So there's a few things I've done besides others.
Okay, so I honestly think a pair of really solid answers from Ime on the situation. He also answered a handful of other questions about his time away, the suspension, all of that. And Tilman actually opened the press conference talking for a solid 5 minutes, kind of addressing just in a general blanket statement about the previous 3 years, kind of what the organization has gone through and why they felt comfortable moving forward with Ime Udoka. And Tilman was even, highlighting the fact that he had a very long conversation with the NBA league office, and they basically gave him the green light internally that through their research, through their vetting, through all the digging that they had done, they saw no reason why the Rockets shouldn't or couldn't proceed with Ime as their next head coach. So there was a lot of the press conference was focused on this. And again, so I think this should be the big takeaways. The Rockets really did handle it, I say almost perfectly, because I think Tilman had one small misstep, although it was not monumental, and that was in his closing statement about the Udoka situation and the baggage that follows him from Boston.
With the situation in Boston, how did you weigh that? Have you seen some negative reaction from any of your season ticket holders? And what is your response to some of those who say this second chance wasn't warranted?
Then they're not a good Christian person. If somebody thinks second, we're a forgiving society, and everybody makes mistakes, and some things maybe we shouldn't forgive people for, but I think what happened in his personal situation is definitely something we forgive for. And I discussed it with the president of my organization, who is a woman, and she was very comfortable with the situation, as well talking to Paige about it. And we're a forgiving world, and anybody that isn't forgiving, then shame on them.
All right. So honestly, first off, kudos to Tilman Fertitta, who I feel like has come a long way from some of the early interviews and media moments and maybe, interview gaffes from his early days as the Rockets owner. He's gotten a lot, maybe it's better PR training, who knows, but really commendable job throughout the majority of this press conference in addressing and handling the situation. His immediate response, right, to throw out the, not a good Christian person thing, I get what he meant by it, and it's the one comment, unfortunately, because I do think the rest of his answer was very poignant to basically highlight, hey, we have women in power in this organization, right? Our president of business operations, Gretchen Shear, is a woman, and she helped sign off on this decision. Paige Fertitta is a woman who helped sign off on this decision, right? Checking with the powers that be, right? And sourcing kind of any concerns or any reasons for worry. I think it was a very solid response, and had it just not been preceded with the Christian comment, just because again it reads a certain way, right, where there's like this underlying, okay, everybody in the world is Christian, and look, at the end of the day, Tilman can be a little rough around the edges at times, but he's a straight shooter, and that's the one thing you really have to appreciate about him. He's not trying to feed you any fake news or any kind of, he's not trying to, BS you when he's up on the podium. He's going to give you straight up, unfiltered Tilman Fertitta, for better or worse. And I think that in this press conference, he was really solid, really commendable in how the Rockets chose to address this entire situation, because what could have happened, and this is why I think that this should be the major takeaway, is they could have chosen to hide about this, right? They could have very easily, Tilman or Rafael at any point in the press conference could have stepped in after Ime's first response or even second response or whatever, or the initial statement at the top of the press conference, and said, you know what, guys, we've addressed it once. We'd like to move on. We'd like to focus on basketball topics. And they didn't do that at any point. They knew that they were going to have to address this situation. They knew that a majority of the questions would be pointed at Ime Udoka and trying to gain a better understanding about what went on in Boston. And I think collectively, all three individuals, and again, the Rockets organization, did a really good job handling this situation. So now we can lay it to rest, we can move on from it, and we can focus on the basketball side of things and the exciting new future as to the start of phase 2 with Ime Udoka as the head coach of your Houston Rockets. So coming up, that's what we're going to do. We're going to dive into some of his questions and answers as to the vision and goals for this team moving forward. Plus, Tilman Fertitta dropping the bombshell news. We had some rumors about a new practice facility for the Rockets, but it's now official. Not exactly how they planned to announce it, but we're going to get to all of that in just one moment. But first, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to the My Garage area of the website and look for the green check to know that the part will fit, or your money back guaranteed. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's continue on here, kind of breaking down some of the takeaways from Ime Udoka's introductory press conference as we pivot into some of his philosophy and some of the goals and kind of vision expectations that he's going to lay out for the young guys on this roster. Let's go ahead and dive into this first question about just the overall youth on this Rockets roster.
First of all, welcome to Houston, Coach.
Thank you.
When you took over the job in Boston, you had 5 players that had 34 years of NBA experience. Coming here, you have the 11 core players who only have a combined 23 years. What is your developmental plan for these young players?
Just trying to expedite the process of becoming professionals. I think, they heard me say it, and the players, one of my first messages will be youth is not an excuse. And so across the board, I think, whether it's making the same mistakes, not making the right defensive assignments, poor shot selection, all that stuff has to be addressed but also improved on. And so understanding that we're going to take some lumps with our age and our youth, but my message to them will be that's not an excuse. You've been in the league, you've been taught, and that's my job to teach them and expedite that process. So understanding that, having some patience with that, just like I had to do in Boston. Had to change some habits there as well, even though those guys were more of a veteran group and guys who have been around, but it's no different from anywhere else. And so look forward to doing that here.
Youth is not an excuse. Oh man, injected into my veins. First off, going through the NBA play-in tournament, every single time that I've ever drawn a comparison between this Rockets rebuild and the OKC rebuild, and hearing Rockets fans push back. I'm going to say irrational Rockets fans push back and be like, no, the Rockets are so much younger than the Thunder. They are young. You have to. No. I said when the Thunder showed out in the play-in game, I said youth should no longer be an excuse for this Rockets team starting next season. Doesn't matter anymore. They need to bring in a guy who understands that. So hearing Ime Udoka say verbatim, youth is not an excuse, had me so excited. I was like almost losing it in my chair. I really do think, right, he is going to bring a level, he's going to elevate this organization to a place where there is going to be a level of accountability that just wasn't here previously, right? Some of the things that he's going to bring to the table, right? Tilman Fertitta highlighted them early on. He's going to bring toughness, respectability, accountability. And when you couple that with the fact that, as we shared in segment 1, right, he's had to own up to the mistakes that he's made, and he thinks that this situation that he's had to live through over these last 6-8 months, however long it's been, will make him a better leader because of the lessons that he's learned from that. And for a guy who has to hold an entire locker room of young men accountable, he has to own up to his own, mistakes. And I think, again, Ime conducted and handled himself beautifully when he was answering these questions, both, again, about the Boston stuff, but then also just about his vision and some of his philosophy and his approach that he's going to use with these young guys. And so when I had the chance to ask Ime a question, I was curious if he saw any parallels between the stars that he was able to develop in Boston and some of the talent on this Rockets roster. Let's go ahead and so we can just go ahead and run that one back right now.
Tilman alluded earlier to the star potential of some of the players on this roster. You had the chance to coach two very talented 3-level scorers in Boston and Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown. Do you see any similarities between their skill sets and some of the guys on this current roster? And what were some of the key lessons that you learned in trying to help Jae'Sean and Jalen kind of get to their star potential?
Yeah, there's definitely some parallels. You just look at the backcourt, Kevin and Jalen, and what they can do. One thing I would say to the players is not all men are created equal on the basketball court, and they do some natural things that others can't do. And so you just have to harness that, teach it the right way, but as well as using their strengths. It was very similar to Jae'Sean and Jalen. I talk about the success that a lot of these young guys have is oftentimes, it's a benefit of what they do individually. You want to kind of nurture that into a team concept, but as well as using their strengths. And so that was the thing with them. They were individual great players, a lot of success one-on-one, but you wanted to grow them as players overall, and I think we did that. Their assist numbers went up as well as ours as a team. They were not, or Jae'Sean more so was not known as a defensive guy, but you have all this capability and ability to do that, and so it was just making them more well-rounded. And so I see the big picture and the potential in guys. They do some things naturally well. You want to build on that, but as well as making them more well-rounded. And so I think I did that with them, and we have potential with a bunch of two-way players here as well.
I really loved and kind of appreciated that answer from Ime, right? Just highlighting, hey, there is some just God-given talent there where these guys are just capable of some incredible things on the basketball court, right? How many times last season did we highlight and note just the fact that, oh, wow, Jalen had an insane game because he's just that talented, right? Or succeeding despite the lack of structure because of how talented Jalen is or Kevin is or Alp or Jabari. Just those moments where we thought, man, if they could just have the right support systems around them, think about the leaps that these guys will take, right? It's like they're playing with ankle weights. It's like they're playing with like this weight dragging them down. And when they finally have a coach who understands better how to harness some of their natural talent and then elevate it, mold it, cultivate it, all that into a more refined product, I mean, the sky's the limit for some of these guys, right? We've seen the two-way potential of guys like Jalen and Kevin. We've seen what Alp, some of the insane ceilings that he'll be able to reach. So imagining what Ime is going to be able to do, unlocking that talent with the guys on this roster is incredibly exciting, given the fact that that's exactly what he already did, albeit for a very brief one-season sample with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, right? Those guys weren't necessarily the best facilitators when he got them. He did increase Boston's playmaking. He upped their assist numbers. He got them to buy in a bit more on the defensive side of the basketball. So if he can accomplish some of those same things with this Rockets group, it's going to be a ton of fun. And speaking of Kevin Porter Jr., he was a surprise guest at the press conference. He jumped in and Ime Udoka highlighted it at one point, which was fun to see.
Patrick has been very open about the pain that they've had to go through these last 2.5, 3 years, and now we're on the other side of that and where we look forward to coming. And so the young guy's growing. I see I got a smart player here. He's trying to get some playing time already. He's the only guy that showed up, but obviously the young talent has to grow and take steps, and so that's my job to help nurture these guys. But the addition of some veterans with the free agency that we have, I think it's only natural, the progression. But these guys have to take steps. The pain has been there. That should fuel you. You go through that, but coming out on the other side will obviously be beneficial for everybody, and it's my job to push these guys.
Coming up, we'll get into some of Ime's thoughts on how to approach the offseason as well as what he plans to do with the assistant coaching staff. We're going to get there in just one moment, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Look, we're always throwing money at something, right? Whether it's kids' school supplies or maybe a new house project, repairs. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? It's time to stop spending your hard-earned money without getting anything in return. Enter Ibotta. You can earn cash back on every shopping trip that you go on. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, DIY project stuff. Just link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 per year in real cash back. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and so many other options. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying it by using code LOCKEDON when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code LOCKED. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKED. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. So I don't have this one teed up as a clip just because it was so short, but it's at least worth highlighting and mentioning, is when asked about what he would do regarding his assistant coaching staff, Ime Udoka did highlight the fact that he will take a look at the current Rockets assistant coaches from this past season and consider them throughout the process. He did highlight that he wants energetic guys, right? He talked about having energetic guys. And first off, I do think it highlights the autonomy that Rafael Stone spoke about in his exit interview that the next head coach would have in deciding his coaching staff and kind of picking the right guys to build, as part of his staff. So at least that continues to track in that regard. And when you talk about, or when Ime talks about having guys that are, high energy, and we know that he had his assistants were incredibly hands-on in Boston, what that leads me, that points me in the direction of is Mahmoud Abdel-Fattah. He matches both of those, right? Mahmoud is so high energy and he is so hands-on in everything that he does as one of the assistant coaches for this Rockets team. And when I say hands-on, I mean he would be pregame for like 30 minutes at a time, poring over film with Jae'Sean or Tate, walking them through certain offensive sets. He'd be breaking it down in real time for them. And then not only that, I would watch him run these drills with these guys on the floor, right? Actively be on the floor, be in certain spots, and kind of coaching them through it in real time. Like, hey, I'm going to screen here, so then you drive here. I want you to put the pass exactly right here in this pocket because that's where the window is going to be. And just like watching him go through some of that at practices, at pregame, seeing the impact that he had on those guys, that to me screams the exact same type of like high energy, hands-on assistant coach that would flourish under Ime Udoka. So I really do hope that Ime gives Mahmoud a chance and that he'll be retained and on this next iteration of the Rockets coaching staff. And I do also think there's some merit to John Lucas sticking around as well. Again, a highly respected name, somebody to provide some continuity from, for these young guys on this Rockets roster. And again, it's not like John Lucas is exactly, he's not a softie, right? John Lucas has zero problem playing the bad cop role and having yet another enforcer in that Rockets locker room. Just the idea of starting out with Udoka, Lucas, and Abdel-Fattah as three of your coaches going into next season, that is a really tough, gritty, like hard-nosed group of coaches that are going to make this, whatever this Rockets team looks like come October, really get after it. Now, he did also, in that clip talking about Kevin Porter Jr. showing up, right? He kind of jokingly said it, but he did talk about, wanting to make sure he got his minutes. And maybe it's reading too much into the tea leaves, maybe take it with a grain of salt, but it is worth noting, right? I think the expectation with Udoka is going to be that guys are going to have to fight for their roles, right? I don't think anything is going to come gift wrapped or given at any point moving forward for this Rockets team, right? In the previous couple seasons, there's just been an understanding, okay, Kevin's going to get his minutes, no matter what. Jalen's going to get his minutes. Jabari's going to get his minutes. And pretty routinely, the only guy who didn't consistently get his minutes, no matter how he played, good or bad, was Alperen Sengun. And that was frustrating because it kind of felt like at times he was being scapegoated by Stephen Silas. But as long as things are treated as a meritocracy and guys have to fight for their minutes, and if you play poorly, then you're going to get benched, or if you are not, sticking up to the levels of respect and accountability that Udoka demands in that locker room, right? If you're showing up late to practice, if you're not fighting hard, if you're not getting back in transition on defense, if you're complaining to the officials, all the little things that kind of drove us insane about this last Rocket season, I don't expect them to be squashed seemingly overnight, but at least moving forward, I feel like we can kind of cautiously be optimistic about there being a level of accountability to where there will be consequences for some of this bad behavior, some of these bad habits that the Rockets have kind of fallen into over these last couple seasons because they're such a young, immature team, right? And I don't think it's anybody's fault necessarily. They just needed more of a heavy-handed approach, more of an iron fist to say, hey, this is not how we're going to do things moving forward, right? Things are going to be very different under Ime Udoka than they were under Stephen Silas. I think we can rest assured of that fact. Now, Ime did also highlight some of his thoughts about free agency and some of the additions or changes that they might make to this Rockets roster.
we start with our guys that we have first and how we can improve them. But the cap space that we mentioned, we like to add some veteran pieces there. Shooting is at a premium in an area we struggled this year, so we want to improve that. And then just some contrasting pieces to what we already have, whether it's bigs. Alperen does some things really well, but we'd like to add some different types of bigs, shooting on the wings. But we have a ton of talent across the board, and it's my job to utilize that.
Okay, this has been one of the quotes that's making the rounds and has everybody a little worried because he talks about adding, other bigs, right, instead of Alperen Sengun. And a lot of people are reading into this comment wrong, thinking that this means the end of Alperen Sengun. Again, it's so funny. It feels like everybody jumps on the chance to ship Sengun out of Houston. To me, I read this as when he said different types of bigs, right? Alpi has a very specific skill set as a big. And what did the Boston Celtics do? They went out and they got a different big to complement and to add in their front court, right? They paired Rob Williams and Al Horford together, two stylistically completely different types of bigs. And they made that front court incredible in Boston by doing so. So I think Ime's answer here is more about finding another type of big that they can maybe put out there with Alperen Sengun, somebody who can maybe share the court with him. And it could also very well be, again, finding somebody who does have a bit of a stylistic difference to Alperen Sengun, right? We've talked about the idea of maybe adding Brook Lopez to this Rockets team in free agency, possibly this offseason. And Brook Lopez would provide a distinct stylistic difference, right? Because suddenly that is a legit 7-footer. He's an outside shooting threat. He's a defensive anchor. He is maybe quite as polar opposite as you can get from Alperen Sengun as possible, depending on whether or not Alpi comes back with a three-point shot. But adding somebody like that can either, A, be subbed in for Alpi and give you just a different look on the floor at the 5 spot, or adding a different type of big, somebody who is another versatile, 6'10", 6'11", can maybe play alongside Alpi in the front court, but gives you a bit of a different look, whether it's offensively, defensively, or both. I think that's more what that comment has to do with from Ime. And it is interesting, right, thinking about how he's going to approach the ability to mesh the veterans and that $60 million in cap space and what the Rockets may or may not do in free agency with the young guys on this roster, right? He spoke, at various points throughout the presser of just the idea of getting the most out of these guys, right? Growing them, turning them into the best versions of themselves, all this, basically saying all the right things, right? As far as press conference grades go, I feel like not only is the hire an A++ for Ime, I think the way that he handled and conducted himself in this presser was also an A++ outcome. Just all things considered, with how sideways things could have gone, he handled himself really, really well. And I think if you're a Rockets fan, you've got to be incredibly excited about the future moving forward. Now, Tilman did also get asked at one point about his spending or lack thereof when he first bought this Rockets team and became the owner. And honestly, his pushback was pretty incredible.
Tilman, when you first took over the team, there were some reports that came out about your potential unwillingness to spend, yet you spent some money on one of the top coaches in the market. What do you have to say for people who make that report that you're not maybe as willing to spend as much money as maybe other owners?
I don't know where I didn't spend it. Somebody's got to show me. We're the only team that has their own private 767 to fly around in. We're building a $70 million practice facility right now. We've been at the top cap every single year. Daryl in his 3 years never asked to go into the luxury tax because it says there's other penalties with it. Because all of our guys were not homegrown. That's how teams get them, and they get into the luxury tax because you keep re-signing players. That's anybody can write whatever they want to write. So,
can you provide more info on the practice facility? Details about that, where it's located, timeline for finishing?
I really screwed up, and we want to do a real formal announcement, but it'll be. We were hoping it would be ready for next season, but just with permitting and everything. But we'll lay it all out for you guys soon, and it's really exciting. It's going to be great. It's in the Galleria area, and I think it'll be a great tool to recruit players.
Tilman's response here is just nothing short of incredible, right? Where he goes, well, you're going to have to tell me where I didn't spend it, right? And for what it's worth, what I was told, a couple years ago when I first kind of inquired about the Daryl Morey era, and I was able to start kind of making some connect, I was like, hey, so like, what was the deal? And it was basically like, well, Daryl never kind of pushed us to do it. And, that's kind of the story that they're sticking with. And whether or not you choose to believe that, I think the proof is at least very much in the pudding, where Tilman has been spending money. The Rockets as an organization have been spending money, right? He just throws out, hey, we've got a private jet, right? Private jet, one of the only teams in the NBA that has that, right? Carts the players around, all that good stuff. Investing $70 million in a practice facility that he didn't even intentionally was not supposed to talk about, right? That had been rumored for a while, talking about it's going to be in the Galleria area, right? That's a huge investment in this organization. So you couple all that with, in addition to the fact that we did get courtesy of Michael Shapiro of Cron.com, who reported earlier Wednesday afternoon, that there was some news on Ime Udoka's contract structure. The deal is worth approximately $20.5 million over 4 years. So he's earning $6.75 million in this first season as the Rockets head coach. So let's say approximate average annual value, about $7 million a year for Udoka's contract. I mean, that's a pretty steep price tag for your head coach, right? So I think when you look, in the grand scheme of things, the private jet, the new practice facility, shelling out for the head coach, the little expenditures here and there, right? Throwing cash at second-round draft picks, all these little moves at the margins and things like that. I think we're at a point where we have to have more confidence moving forward, or there should be now enough evidence to have confidence that the organization is willing to spend and will spend when necessary moving forward. I think we are far removed from the days where, the luxury tax this and Tilman won't spend and he's cheap and all that. I think the organization has given us a lot of confidence about their willingness to do the right things for the organization to build, again, winning habits and build towards a winning culture moving forward. So I just wanted to highlight all that. And I think that actually gets me through all the clips that I had teed up. I want to make sure I've got some additional takeaways here. Now, Udoka did highlight a lot of other various things throughout the press conference, little things here and there about his coaching philosophy, the hard-nosed, gritty mentality, his time spent as a role player, his ability to connect with and motivate players. The entire press conference is available online. I'm going to put a link to it in the description, so if you want to watch it start to finish and then come back and draw your own conclusions from that, I just chose and kind of cherry-picked the spots that were most interesting to me, I guess, to kind of unpack here on the show. It is worth noting that Tilman Fertitta did, at the very end of his press conference, highlight Kevin Porter Jr. and his relationship with him, citing that he is, in his 6 years of having this Rockets team, he is by far his favorite player to discuss things with on and even sometimes on the court during games. So back to what I said earlier about Tilman as just kind of a straight shooter kind of guy, I don't think that was performative at all. I think it was just a very genuine comment from Tilman, where he's sitting at the press conference table and he sees KPJ, the only player on his team in front of him, 6 feet away from him, and he's just like, hey, I want to shout out this young man who I've enjoyed spending my time with. So I think that's worth noting. And then the other thing that I want to point out is the Rockets were doing their as for again, for anybody who's a little concerned about the future of Alperen Sengun on this team, the Rockets did their promos, hype photo shoot, whatever, with Ime Udoka in the Rockets locker room. A lot of red lighting. He's throwing up the H in one of the photos. Super awesome. In one of the photos, he's sitting down with a basketball in his lap, and behind him, there are 2 jerseys that are hanging behind him. It's very clearly a Jalen Green jersey and an Alperen Sengun jersey. And all I'll say is that when you're running a multi-billion-dollar organization like the Houston Rockets, the amount of care and thought that goes into the posts and the things that the digital department puts out there on social media, the amount of red tape and the amount of yeses and okays that have to be had for any level of posts like that, everything is meticulously calculated, right? So they very carefully chose the 2 jerseys that they were going to stick behind Ime Udoka. in that it was Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, right? They could have very easily chosen Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr., right? Or Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. They very clearly chose Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun. So I think that at least moving forward, and the one pushback that I got to this when I highlighted it on social media was, oh, well, Silas had, Harden and Rocco and all these other jerseys behind him. That was a very different time period for the organization. That was a period of a lot of flux. And of course, you're going to still want to try and market your best players, right? Westbrook, Harden at that time, right? Guys who were on the roster. You're not just going to hide their jerseys because the writing's on the wall and you think they're on the way out. Right now, this Rockets team is at the ground floor of trying to build something special. And if there was a player that they didn't necessarily think was going to stick around long term, they likely wouldn't include his jersey in the photo shoot for the brand new head coach of the team. That's all I'm saying. So with that, that's going to do it for today's episode, our instant reaction to Ime Udoka's introductory press conference. Give me your thoughts on what Ime Udoka had to say. Go watch the full thing, come back, report back here, share your thoughts on how the Rockets handled the introduction of Ime Udoka as the Houston Rockets' new head coach. Let me know in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your comments if you're an everydayer. Let me know. I love the everydayers. You guys are the best. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.